Well, good morning. Welcome to Debbie's Back Porch. The other day, my Facebook friend, Brenna Greenberg Rubenstein, posted this beautiful thing in our cooking group, a Pavlova, and I decided to see if I could make it without sugar. Because some of us just can't have sugar. So no sugar and gluten-free, a beautiful dessert. I'm going to list all the ingredients in the info section. And hey, if you like our videos, give us a thumbs up and subscribe and click on the little bell icon at the top right and you'll get a notice when I post new videos about twice a week. Now let's get cooking. So we're going to start out with 3 egg whites, and you want to separate them while they're cold. They just separate more easily. And then we're going to let them come to room temperature, about 15 or 20 minutes, before we actually start making our meringue. And that's the basis of this Pavlova, is meringue. Now, I'm going to make this meringue with Splenda, which is actually pretty easy to do. I've done this for a long time, but it works exactly the same with sugar. So I'll explain as I go along. If you don't want a sugar-free dessert, you don't have to. And if you'd rather use a different artificial sweetener, I really can't tell you the proportions, but I'm sure you can figure that out. And then I'll show you the fruit that I'm going to use. The Pavlova is topped with fresh fruit, and it's real versatile. You can use any fruit you want. I've got 6 ounces of blackberries. I'm going to use about, this is a big package, I'm going to use about half of these blueberries, 5 or 6 ounces. And then I'm going to pick out 6 or 7 big, beautiful strawberries. And to sweeten this up, I've got a ½ cup of Splenda. You can use a ½ cup of sugar. And I'm adding a teaspoonful of cornstarch. In order to make a meringue with Splenda, the cornstarch helps, but the Pavlova recipe has cornstarch even if you use sugar. So if you want to use sugar, it's a ½ cup sugar and a teaspoonful of cornstarch. And I'm just going to kind of mix those together. And I'll add them as I make the meringue. Now you see a lemon here too. And I'm going to use it for my acid. You'll need acid. And then I'm going to add 1 teaspoon, a quarter teaspoon of cream of tartar to my eggs before I start beating them. And the cream of tartar just helps them puff up and hold air. And you could put that in with the sugar if you wanted to. It doesn't make any difference. I just put it in first. So I have my whip attachment here, and I just put the eggs with the cream of tartar in my blender, and I start out just a little bit slow, but then I'm going to whip this up pretty fast, because the thing with meringue that you want is to incorporate air and to make it puff up. So I'm going to start beating it a little bit faster, and I'll cut away because you don't want to watch this all. And when it gets all puffy and white like this, I'm going to start adding the sugar. And I'm going to add it just a tablespoonful at a time, and let it mix in before I add the next tablespoonful. I'll turn it down just a little bit so you can see. We're looking for what they call the ribbon stage. It's kind of hard for you to see in this bowl, but if you do it like that, it leaves little ribbons on top. See, it stays a little bit separate. That's the stage you want to get to before you start adding your sugar mixture here, sugar and cornstarch. So I'll turn it on, and then I'm just going to start spooning the sugar mixture in. And I'll do this 1 tablespoonful at a time until it mixes in. And I may have to scrape it down once or twice, but I'm going to get it up at a pretty good speed. And I'll be back. So when I have all the sugar in, I'm going to stop and pull down any that's on the sides. I want to get that all in there. And you can see the stage we're at now. It's making peaks, but it's not quite as stiff as we want it. We want this to be nice and stiff. because we're going to make a bowl with this, and I want it to stand up good. So I'm going to put some speed on it and really whip it up until we have nice stiff peaks. And you'll know when you're at that stage, but I'm going to show you so you can see. We've still got some things to add, but we want to get to the stiff peak stage before we add the last couple ingredients. So I did a little time lapse there to just let you see. You can already see how stiff that is and how it's standing up. Let me show it to you here. Now I can't get it turned quite right so that you can see it, but you see how that peak stands up, and see how it doesn't want to come off of my spatula here. So it really holds its shape well. There you go. You can see that. Now I've got just a couple more ingredients to add. You need an acid, so I'm using lemon juice. That's about a teaspoonful, maybe just a little bit more. And the reason you want an acid in this is because you want to change the texture of this meringue a little bit so that it sort of makes a marshmallowy inside. And I'm going to add a little bit of vanilla to this also. You can use something else. You can use almond flavor if you like. Because this is a very flexible recipe. You could throw some cocoa in here too and make a chocolate meringue. But I've added those last two ingredients, and I'm just going to fold them in. And then I'm going to turn it up and whip it just a little bit more. Oh yes, I just added a little lemon zest. That's optional. Really makes a good flavor. So we're going to whip this up just a little bit, and I'm going to sort out my counter just a little, and then I'll show you the next steps, because we're going to bake this beautiful meringue. Can't wait. I have my oven preheating to 350. I've drawn a circle on this piece of parchment. I just put my pie plate down. It's about 8.5 inches. And then I turned it over so the ink's on the bottom. And look at that meringue. I want you to look how stiff that is. And then I'm going to pour the meringue into the middle of the circle, or ladle it in. You can't pour it. It won't come out. It's that stiff. Now the circle is just a guide. You don't have to actually fill it exactly to that circle, but we want to form a kind of a round bowl shape. I wish I'd used 4 eggs because this one ended up being a little bit small. Next time I'm going to use 4 egg whites. And you know, the beauty here of meringue is that if you make it with no sugar, which you can, it really has just almost no carbs. And if you're eating a low-carb diet, the only thing in this whole recipe that would bother you at all would be the little tiny bit of cornstarch. And since this is going to make, well, it'll make 7 small slices. That's not a lot of cornstarch. So I'm just going to pour it out and start shaping it into a kind of a bowl. So I'll pull it out toward the circle, toward the edges of the circle. And you can really shape this any way you want to. Some folks just make a disc. But I want a bowl because my meringue is will be kind of small, and I've got a lot of fruit that I want to put on it. So I'm going to form this into a bowl shape so it will hold more. And you can decorate it. You can put little swirls and stuff, just however you want to do it. And you know, if I'm going to do this often, I'm going to need to get one of those flat spatula knives, because I think that would work better. It's kind of sticking. And I don't want to wet my spatula here to make it not stick, because that might, the added water might cause a problem. I don't know if it would or not, but that's why I didn't do it. But we're getting a bowl here. And I think that's going to bake up into a pretty bowl. How's that? I think that's looking about good. I'm going to put this in the oven, and when I do, I'm going to turn my heat down to 250 and set my timer for an hour. So I'm going to let this cook very slowly for an hour, and when it's done, I'll turn my heat off and open the door just a little bit, the oven door just a little bit, and then you're going to let it sit and cool naturally for anywhere from an hour to 8 hours. You're just going to let it sit in there. Gosh, this stuff is stiff. I can't get it all off. Using my finger, my hands are clean. So into the oven for an hour, down to 250. We'll be back. So it's been an hour. I've turned the heat off. I'm going to open the door a little bit. And you know my oven light's not working, so I'm going to shine a flashlight on that. It should be a pale tan. It is. It's still puffy. Leave it alone for an hour. And while it's cooling, I'm going to work with the fruit. I have a 1/4 cup of sugar-free apricot preserves in here. And I put my blackberries in. I'm heating it just enough for the preserves to melt a little. This is a hot little metal pan, and kind of lightweight. But I'm just stirring it around, and I'm going to let those melt. And when it gets almost melted, I'll fold in my blackberries. Now, the reason for the apricot preserves is to add some sweetness to the fresh fruit. And I'm not using any sugar, so I'm using preserves. And you know, you can make sugar-free preserves and jellies with Pomona pectin. One of these days I'll do that for you. So I've poured in the blueberries. I'm just going to stir this around until they're all nicely coated. And then I'm going to turn it off and let it cool. Give it plenty of time to cool before I finish up the Pavlova. See, we've got some little chunks of apricot. And the strawberries I'm going to leave till the last. And by the way, don't overcook this. It's just enough to sort of partially melt the sugar-free apricot preserves. And you can use raspberry if you'd rather. Now we're going to make our sugar-free whipped cream. And I'm going to pour about a cup of heavy whipping cream, heavy cream, whichever cream you've got, into this bowl. And again, in order to make this stand up and be like whipped cream, we're going to add about a little bit less than a teaspoon, somewhere between about a half a teaspoon is enough. And then of cornstarch. And then we're just going to start beating. I'm going to do a little time lapse here, but you'll see how beautiful this gets. And I'm using my little hand mixer here. You could use your KitchenAid. I haven't washed my bowl yet, so that's why I'm not using it. But also because it's kind of easier to do in a small container. And that's 2 tablespoons full of Splenda. You can do the exact same thing with sugar. You do not need the cornstarch if you do sugar. And we're just going to beat this until it's to the stage we like. Now, one note about making whipped cream: don't overbeat it. When it gets to the right texture, stop. Because if you overbeat it past that texture, it starts to make butter. And the whole thing takes about 2.5 to 3 minutes. I do want to add just a little bit of vanilla. And I am doing time lapse here, but I'm going to let you see most of it because I want you to see the point at which you should stop beating. You don't want to go beyond it. And just a little bit of vanilla. That's about a half teaspoonful. Vanilla's optional. I put vanilla in almost everything. Just because I love the flavor of real vanilla extract. So let's beat it a little bit more. And you can see already it's getting very thick. And there'll just come a point at which all of a sudden you can tell that it's very thick. It's going to make stiff peaks. Not there yet. Sorry for the shadow. You know, this is my kitchen. It's kind of small, kind of hard sometimes to manage the light. And it's a dark kitchen. My kitchen's always been dark. I hate that. Need some big bright lights. So here we go. We're beating. And as I say, the whole thing from start to finish takes about 3 to 4 minutes. You can also do this with your immersion blender. Just put it in that long, thin container and use your immersion blender. It works a little bit faster. Actually, it works a lot faster. So there you go. Not quite, just a little bit more. You could stop there, but I want to make it just a little bit stiffer. And I want you to see that place at which it changes. There you go. Now, see the change in the texture? Whoops. Don't go past this step. And see how thick and rich that is? That's even beyond stiff points, stiff peaks. So let's get this off. We're going to start putting our pavlova together. Oh, it's just going to be so yummy. Here's our meringue. I want you to listen to it. It's very stiff, but inside it's very creamy, kind of marshmallowy. And see, we've got just that little bit of browning on the tips there. And I've carefully taken off the paper. See, I've got some little chips there. Very carefully take off the paper. And because you don't want to break it, this is easily breakable. And if you break it, just stick it back together and put some whipped cream on it. Nobody will notice. But luckily, I didn't break it. Now we're going to spoon in this whipped cream, and we're going to continue with the bowl idea. And you just want to totally line the inside of the meringue bowl with a whipped cream bowl. And play with it and get all creative if you want to. But mostly what you just want to do is to get this whipped cream in. And the whipped cream, while it's there for flavor and it's yummy, it's also to line, put a barrier between the meringue and the fresh fruit to keep it from seeping in and changing the color, because it's very porous. And this whipped cream, oh, it's so thick, I can't get it all off. There you go. Making my bowl. You know, I just love to play with this kind of stuff. Make it pretty. I'm going to put a little bit more there. I'm leaving just a little bit in the bowl. I don't want to use quite all of it. And 1 cup of cream makes plenty of whipped cream for this. So now I'm going to spoon in the fruit that's glazed with the apricot preserves. And let's talk about fruit. You know, you can use anything. I'm thinking my next one's going to be a chocolate meringue with raspberries. I think that would be so yummy. And just fill it full. It's going to hold it. I think we had about 10 ounces total of fruit. And this is a fairly small pavlova. 3 eggs. You could make it with 4 and add more. And then I'm going to just take strawberries. I was only able to fit 6. And I'm going to place them in. And, you know, this works perfectly well with just strawberries. If you don't want the other fruit, make you a few of the big ones really nice and tall like this. And then slice up the small ones and let those be the fruit underneath. And, you know, little dab of whipped cream on the top, optional, but I like it. And there you go. Look at that. Isn't that pretty? Boy, I just love this. You know, you eat with your eyes, before you eat with your mouth. Isn't that pretty? Now let's slice it. I want you to see the texture of this. And I'm slicing between the strawberries, which means I'm going to get 6 slices out of this. And make sure you cut through. Let me give that just another little cut. Cut all the way through the meringue so it doesn't tear. And then I'm going to try to take a slice out. And it may just all collapse. There you go. No, it didn't collapse. Wow. Look at this. Now let me get this back over here and I'm going to show you. So here is my slice. And I want you to see the textures in here because that meringue just has an amazing texture. See all that lovely apricot glaze? It's going to be hard for you to believe that this is low carb and sugar free. Look at the whipped cream. I got to get a little bit of that fruit. Let me show you the texture of this meringue. Because you see that? It's like a marshmallow on the inside. And melts in your mouth like cotton candy. Boy, I hope you try this and I hope you like it. If you're watching carbs, this is a decadent dessert that doesn't get you off your diet. Hope you try it and hope you like it. And I hope to see you again tomorrow.